symbol of modern ingenuity. There is nothing better than the dehumanization of human labor by turning individuals into nothing more than gears in an ever-growing monster aimed solely at stripping away all natural resources and turning them into cold hard profit. Except, of course, for the satisfaction of a properly built assembly line. There's just something soothing about efficient, smooth logistics, and video game developers must agree with me on some level, because in recent years there are more and more sandbox-style games focused on the very art of automated logistics. Usually with the help of, you guessed it, conveyor belts. So, if you are the kind of person that likes this stuff, well, you're in luck, and you're invited to join me on my wonderful journey through the world of Conveyor Belt Simulators.
Game over, yeah!
Okay, first things first, before we begin, I'm already gonna say this straight up front, there's not going to be Factorial on this list. The reason for that is because everybody already knows about Factorial. I know about Factorial, you know about Factorial, and I didn't play Factorial. Sorry about that, Factorial fans. But yeah, one day I'm probably going to play it, and it's going to be great, and I'm probably going to do a complete review on it in a separate video, but Factorial is not on this list. Sorry, no Factorial here. Did you get that? I know Factorial exists, I know it's really good, I know you guys should probably check it out, but there's not going to be in this list, okay? So please don't kill me, alright, for not having Factorial here. Anyway, with that out of the way, first up, let's talk about one of my personal favorite colony simulators, Factory Town. At first glance, Factory Town doesn't look like it belongs here. You basically create workers and then command them to do all sorts of things, and by all sorts of things I mean carrying object A to point B. And you also have to build paths that they'll try to follow as closely as possible, since the paths allow them to run faster and thus be more efficient in carrying object A to point B. But it isn't long before their efficiency hits its limits and you have to build chutes, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, chutes, to allow buildings to just directly dump things onto them and make gravity do the rest of the work in delivering the goods. But that is, of course, not a proper solution at all, and that's only the very early game. Soon you have to develop a school building that is capable of researching more buildings, and then you use said buildings in order to gather resources that were previously unavailable and use them to both research and create new buildings that will get more resources, thus progressing down the research tree, but you also have to sell the product of your work in the markets, since both construction, farming and researching also require money, and you get different kinds of money depending on the complexity of the product you're making, thus adding more depth to the game and requiring you to create ever more complex paths that allow for maximum efficiency in delivery of resources everywhere around your town, which will stretch your workers and chutes to their limits. Thankfully, even before you reach the mid-game, you will unlock the abilities to make your first very basic level conveyor belts, and it's there that the real conveyoring belting simulating begins, as conveyor belts have the basic push necessary to stand up against the laws of gravity and allow you to send resources to all kinds of different locations, with buildings pushing their products directly into the belts, thus saving you the work of having to use workers to manually carry things, and instead using your extra populations as workers inside the buildings you create, as you slowly strip all of the natural resources of the overworld, which is exactly how the world should be. Of course, if you're new to this kind of genre or subgenre, you probably don't know yet, but things aren't as simple as just building a production chain, since resources accumulate and occupy space inside of the buildings that essentially bottlenecks the production until they're used. You have to build storehouses to keep the efficiency up. Plus, some buildings are capable of producing more than one product at the same time, in which case you need to separate them both into different proper paths, and some buildings require multiple resources to craft a single one, thus requiring you to juggle multiple paths into a single building, and also the different currencies things comes back regularly as you go up the building tiers, requiring you to think when you should stop selling a simple resource and should instead completely change its production line in order to combine it with other resources to craft the next tier of complex resources that will provide you with the next tier of currency needed to keep up with the next tier of buildings running. It's always on tiers, and it's pretty deep and great and keeps you moving and rethinking the stuff you did earlier in order to do the next stuff. Despite all of this complex sounding stuff, this is still the game I recommend as the entry point for new players mostly, due to its one thing that differs it from most of the other games on this list, and that are the AI workers. The AI workers are basically cheating, since if you get too overwhelmed and stuff, you can just order them to deliver the things, and they will basically do your job of finding the most efficient path by themselves, thus freeing some of your brain space to plan for other stuff. But they're also the most inefficient method of delivery in the entire game by sheer lack of speed, and are better spent working on buildings to deal with the population limits. So they're kind of a crutch, really. But they're a good one that provides Factory Town with a very smooth difficulty curve, allowing you to slowly adapt as you see fit, and as such, yeah, I personally think this game is a great starting point in the conveyor belt genre. One thing most conveyor belt simulator games have in common is that they have no real failure state. Now, that's not always true. Sometimes there are enemies and sometimes there are other obstacles, but most of the time, the only punishment you get for inefficient lines is the pain of having to wait longer for shit to get done. To the point sometimes it would take so long you just want to delete everything or just quit and restart from the beginning with your newly acquired knowledge of how the game actually works, just so you won't have to deal with your own blatant incompetence for any longer. You are your worst enemy. And an understanding of the conventions of this subgenre is what brings us to the next game. Big Pharma is a big boy game, a big boy conveyor simulator if you will, which won't hold your hand with any AI workers to help. This here is 100% conveyor belts from machine to machine, and you'll have to deal with all that entails. The goal of Big Pharma is simple. You will import ingredients, you will use machine to convert said ingredients into useful stuff, and then you convert that stuff into drugs and sell them. Get useless stuff from point A and turn it into useful stuff before delivering out of B. That's it. Unlike most entries on this list, Big Pharma isn't about converting raw resources into materials for buildings and then using said buildings to convert even more resources into materials. It's all about making the most money you can by selling drugs and then using that money to make more complex, better selling drugs. So almost the same scheme really, except all of the buildings use the exact same resource to be constructed. That resource being cold hard cash.
New world event.
But how do you turn useless stuff into useful stuff after all? The answer to that is concentration. Each ingredient you import has a specific concentration number and one or more traits. Positive traits that can cure disease, or negative traits that can cause side effects. And every trait is only activated on the ingredient when the concentration of said ingredient is at a certain number. So ideally, you want to build a production line with machines that lower or increase the concentration number until the positive traits are active and the negative ones are inactive.
Insufficient upgrade points.
Simple stuff, really, right? Well,
Research
except
complete.
not really, because some positive traits are always in the range of a negative one, plus sometimes you will need to get the concentration to a certain number, then pass the ingredient to a specific machine to convert a weak positive trait into a stronger one that sells for much higher.
Has released a new product.
Other times, in order to perform this conversion, you will need a catalyst trait, and that requires mixing two ingredients together, but that essentially replaces the traits of an ingredient with the traits of another ingredient based on their order, and if their order is wrong, you will need a machine to change the order of the traits of one of the ingredients so you can successfully mix them together. And yes, if that all sounds complex and that I'm explaining it wrong, it's probably because I'm going too fast, and because, yeah, it really is that complex, and it's going to get even more complex than that as you go on. And you will need to deal with all of the usual bottlenecking, low production efficiency issues on top of all of that. And that's just on the production line side though, because Big Pharma is a full-fledged drug selling simulator. And thus, on the business side, you will need to place your limited amount of executives on just the right places in order to market your drugs and maximize profit. You will need to micromanage the sale prices of every drug you produce according to your stock and demand, and you will need to invest in researchers to develop new machines and possible ways to tackle the market, And you will also need to invest in explorers to send to remote
A
regions of the
competitor has
world
released
to
a
search
new
for
product.
potential new ingredients, all while dealing with competitors who can at any moment release drugs that can and most often will be in direct competition with one of your existing products, plus world events that can increase or decrease the sales of your drugs at any moment for a variety of reasons. So yeah, you can complain about many things, but you can't say Big Pharma isn't the full-on drug tycoon experience with all of the bells and whistles you'd expect from such an experience. It also has a deep understanding of the subgenre it's been placed in, and with that comes the game's main campaign that is made up of multiple challenging scenarios of escalating difficulty that each slowly opens up with new options related to ingredient complexity
Product name
and
required.
research/exploration tree size, thus offering a good difficulty curve. But
Product
also its
name
acute
required.
awareness of how to best challenge the player leads it to have the biggest but most reasonable possible failure state for this kind of game: time limits. Safe to say, this game is not for the faint of heart that want a slow-paced, relaxing experience, as every single challenge will rush you to complete it as fast as possible, with a failure state being reached after a certain amount of time. Luckily, the game also comes with a sandbox mode and custom game options allowing you to play it as you please. This, plus a great tab-style UI that allows you to quickly switch between
A
management
competitor
modes
has
as needed
released a new
in a very
product.
sleek and intuitive way, allows me to recommend it to pretty much
Research
everyone.
complete.
It's an experience that is as deep as you want it to be, and makes for a pretty cool secondary entry point or maybe the next stop on your conveyor belt journey. But this one doesn't hold your hand at all. There are no clutches or AI help. It's your design all the way to the end, and honestly, all of the different management points that you have to pay attention all add up to make this one of the most well-rounded,
A competitor
fully
has
deep
released a
experiences
new
you probably
product.
ever have in gaming. So if that's what you're looking for, you can jump on into this one with no reservations. Okay, so just let me be honest and say that this next one is kind of just straight up fucking cheating, and is probably the one that will differ the most from every single other game on this list, since it drops all pretenses of being a sandbox game and it's just a straight up puzzler. It's called Mashav, and it's great. It's fun, and it has more in common with Zakatronics games than the rest of this list, but whatever, it has conveyor belts in it, and I like it, so straight into the list it goes. Mashav is a game separated into different stages. Each stage gives you a limited amount of space, a limited amount of money to spend, and it asks you to, with those limitations in mind, build a completely automated production line capable of serving fast food dishes. You also get graded on two other categories: power consumption, which is determined by how much electric power your setup consumes, and you also get graded on the number of ingredients spent, which is basically exactly what it says, making sure you're not wasting ingredients by generating more than what is necessary to create the orders the customers are asking for. You can't fail based on those two extra categories though. You just earn more medals, let's call them that, by doing them to prove you're the ultimate Mashav. They're cool objectives to aim for, provided you're enough of a galaxy brain for that. Mashav, however, does have a failure state, and that is your reputation. If you produce too many extra orders and let them rot, or if you fail to deliver enough meals on time thanks to a rush hour or such, or maybe even a food critic since they demand their food faster than other customers, or maybe a disaster strikes in a variety of other ways. Well, whatever, what happens is, if you lose your reputation and that reputation hits zero, it's game over, man. So you have to be sure to deliver those meals safe and sound and in good time. There's also space and time, I guess, but being unable to deal with those means essentially you lost the stage before it even begun, which makes you feel even dumber and sadder than if you just have failed normally. Yeah. Also, unlike the previous games, where the different parts of a production line could only be programmed to craft different resources, prioritize certain recipes, or just not programmable at all, and they just kinda did their thing with no outside input possible. Here, you can program almost every single damn thing to do specific tasks based on specific conditions, and you will likely have to. even the very basic dumb robot arm that just serves to take things and put them in other places because the conveyor belts here are just too damn fancy to deal with all of that basic bringing stuff from point A to point B job. Well, here all the arms, even the dumbest ones, have to be reprogrammed most of the time, since they usually just drop stuff right in front of them, but most of the time you want them to drop to their right or to their left instead. You will need to program smart arms, because they're the only ones smart enough to pick up ingredients only after they've been cooked, and you can program the grills and deep fryers as well, so they can consume little energy but take longer to cook, or do the opposite and spend large amounts of energy for faster cooking. It all depends on the needs of your assembly lines. And of course, there is the best part. The part anyone who played this game will attest is a really cool one. It's the almighty order reader, which can make a machine do their job for a certain number of times or be activated for a certain number of sections, all based on specific orders it receives from the customers, adding another layer of programming clusterfuck on top of everything else that is already in the game. It isn't all about complicating your life though, since this game comes with its very own test lab level to allow you to figure out with no limits what is the best way to deal with any specific situation, and you can at any moment select a group of objects during the test lab or any stage really, and then essentially save them on a list of object groups that you can carry from level to level, thus essentially being able to copy-paste your best solutions whenever you feel it is necessary to do so. This is a great tool to tackle the ever-growing complexity of each challenge, and I just have to congratulate the devs for giving the players such a cool tool that allows them to focus on the new challenges rather than just keep repeating the old ones whenever a stage requires them to. I personally think this game is just fantastic, since I really enjoy anything that allows me to flex my brain muscles with the end result being a smooth and efficient assembly line. But I can't really recommend this to just anyone, especially anyone that wants a casual conveyor belt simulation experience. This game is hardcore, and the later stages will make most people cry without mercy. And I'm sure some people just get really excited when they hear that. I'm looking at you, Zechatronics fanatics. But if you can't deal with very strict limitations and the willingness to accept optimization and efficiency aren't only favorable but straight up demanded of you at most stages, then yeah, approach this one with caution, for it is definitely the hardest of the batch. This next game is even more of a cheat than the last one, if that's even possible, because it features no conveyor belts at all. But at least there's trains, that's something. Let's just say it is an honorable mention, and you will soon get the reason why I put it on this list. Anyway, the game is called The Colonists, and it's about leading a colony of cute little robots to spread all the way across different maps while draining them of resources in order to build cool stuff. This one is kind of similar to Factory Town, but there are a number of differences, the main one being that the production lines of The Colonists are just a lot simpler than Factory Town, with it mostly being about mining or farming for resources, then bringing them to be processed into better objects that will get processed later into better objects. But it is mostly linear, with a few curveballs thrown along the way to keep things interesting. And in Factory Town, eventually being able to reshape the land could play a major role in your construction plans, while in The Colonists you just kind of deal with the terrain you've been given on a flat plane most of the time. But make no mistake, because unlike in Factory Town, you can't cheat using AI here without everything being terribly inefficient, because The Colonists has a unique path system you have to use in order to control your robots. Sure, you get your basic paths that allow any robot to traverse them, but the way the game works is that every building has a robot next to it, and the job of that robot is to get the materials the building needs to work inside of the building. And if you just build paths and left it at that, every robot would have to leave their building and go all the way to the mining or crafting facility to get the resources, which would be really inefficient. Thankfully, however, instead of paths, you can also choose to create roads, which works by allowing you to set down a post and then another post on a limited range from the first post, and the space between those posts becomes a road. Said roads increase efficiency because a helpful delivery bot is always placed right between the two posts, and said robot automatically delivers resources placed in one post to the post on the other side, thus allowing you to easily automate the flux of resources while keeping things simpler than a one-way conveyor belt. In fact, you could say The Colonists is actually a game about managing two-way conveyor belts and keeping them in balance with the more traditional paths, since overusing roads and not paying attention to their placement can easily lead to bottlenecking, as one post can only have so many resources under it at any given time. And even further beyond the basic paths and roads, you can of course build trains and perhaps even cooler to some people, boats that you can use to visit and transfer resources between different islands. And they all have a fully customizable itinerary for maximum efficiency. Yes, that is a thing. Other than the main difference in villager locomotion, the colonists are just kind of what you'd expect. You bring rare resources or crafted ones to a workshop, and there you research the next tier of buildings, which you use to mine even rarer resources while replanning and rebuilding your production chains with the new options available to truly optimize the space and resources you've been given. There's also a stock market of resources you can access to trading what you've got with what other colonies across the galaxy have gotten should you be facing a shortage of resources on your current map, and also combat, but I didn't really care about the combat at all, so whatever. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows, because compared to the other games on this list, this one, it's kind of really simple, which hey, it doesn't bother me at all since I can take it easy and simple on my production lines when I'm feeling very casual. But for people trying to get true depth, then well, saying this game is shallow is unfair, but its depth just doesn't really hold a candle to the other games on this list, so it might not please the really hardcore crowd. Also, it's filled with bugs, some affecting the very pathfinding AI that the game lives and dies by. Hell, at one point I completely destroyed a road because I found a more efficient path and built a road there, but the robots just became incredibly confused and refused to use the new road I built, which, in a subgenre known for just how much remaking some plans need down the line, it's just kind of a bummer. But if it wasn't fun, then it would have been on this list at all. And while The Colonists is not the best conveyor belt simulator, especially since it doesn't have any conveyor belts, I still think it's worth the time if you find yourself interested in it. It is cute, charming, and it has just the right amount of depth to be a game worth thinking about. And if you're unsure, then just try to pick it up on a sale then. And of course, I saved the best for last, because no other game has the feel and atmosphere this one does. This is because out of all of the games on this list, this is the only one that is not top-down and is arguably the one with the most interesting graphics. Factory Town got its charming indie appeal with simple geometry and 2D sprite-based resources. Big Pharma got that clean and blueprint-looking appeal going for it. Mashav and the Colonists both banked on the simple but charming aesthetic of basic models with basic animations, blending in as representations of highly robotical individuals, but no other game on this list is the first-person, realistic but shiny, full-on, open-world, 3D multiplayer, co-op buzzword experience that is Satisfactory. Satisfactory has come out for a while on the Devil's Temple, that is the Epic Game Store, but it's coming soon to Steam, so now feels like an appropriate time to gush all about it as much as possible. Unlike other titles, Satisfactory tests you with going down and dirty by slowly mining and refining objects yourself before slowly automating all of the processes completely in first-person view, which not only increases the immersion, but also makes the process of walking through the factory you just built into a really satisfying experience. Sure, a bird's eye view of all the moving pieces can bring a tear to the eye of anyone who worked long and hard to keep things efficient, but getting really close to the nuts and bolts of everything, and well, just straight up riding on the conveyor belts of your creations is just too damn good, if not arguably better depending on your personal tastes. In Satisfactory, you take on the role of a worker for the Fix-It Corporation, who got sent to a planet in who knows where that is filled with natural goodies, so now it's your job to harvest said natural goodies and process them into useful parts to send it all back to fix it, so they will unlock the next tier of harvesting goodness for you. So yeah, get part A to point B, craft into C and send to D. This is the 5th game on this damn list and you know the song and dance by now. And of course, your main enemy remains the same. Poor planning that leads to bottlenecking and slow production lines that take forever to make what you need to reach the next tier. But the first-person perspective really helps to shake things up. It's not enough anymore to just make efficient conveyor belt paths, you also need to make a way for you to traverse through them in order to perform maintenance as well as build towers to give you a high advantage point to observe how everything is going on at any given time when you're not clearing out vegetation with a chainsaw in order to place steel foundations to even out your factory floor, of course. And you also have to watch out for power consumption, lest you accidentally shut everything down by tripping a circuit breaker and having to reset it, which yes, is something that can actually happen on this game. Just being in first person changes the rules of the game fundamentally, but going beyond that, you also need to do some heavy exploration. The game's roads is made out of multiple biomes, each rich on all kinds of resources, and being able to get resources from anywhere and efficiently deliver them to the correct place, regardless of how far or treacherous the terrain can get, is really exciting. And you are able to build cool vehicles of different kinds to aid on that exploration, which just adds to the fun you can get from controlling a single individual character, rather than acting like a god from above. Also helping keep that adventurous spirit are animals like radioactive slugs that you can use to upgrade your building's efficiency, and also more dangerous animals that can hurt you and will kill you, making you drop everything you are carrying in true Minecraft fashion. Wait, is Minecraft technically a conveyor belt simulator? Well, let's not get into that right now. And the environment you explore also has a high variety of, let's call them, structural layouts and an even higher degree of verticality, but virtually you have no tools to reshape it. Sure, you can build metal floors and walls to structure your factory on the most optimized layout possible, but you can't reshape the very structure of the ground. So you have to deal with building on top of chasms and on the walls of massive cliffs in order to build your way across the planet, while dealing with potential hazards that might affect your expansion. Plus, the game is still on early access and is delivering new game-changing stuff with each update. For example, in the newest experimental update, they added pipes and thus the need to build liquid pipelines that work different from your usual conveyor belt style delivery, in that the liquids are realistically influenced by gravity and require pumping and other additional extra work in order to safely reach their destination. Satisfactory tries its best and, in my personal opinion, succeeds in delivering the full 3-dimensional building potential that is either small or non-existent on other games of the genre, to the point a vertical cross-section of a multi-layered factory is just as potentially entertaining to watch and manage as the top-down view of it. And it's through these kinds of changes that play to the strengths of what a full 3D playable planet can do that Satisfactory really manages to distance itself from anything currently available on the market. Of course, not everything is perfect. You can craft pretty much anything you need by hand, thus circumventing the entire automation process for quite a few things in the game, though you can't really get very far on any reasonable time frame without placing some good old conveyor belts. So yeah, that is a very minor problem, but there's also the fact that while many games in this list use procedural level generation or multiple level layouts to make everyone particularly unique, Satisfactory only has one single, very big open world map, and that means that every aspect of exploring and finding all kinds of cool new stuff everyone just won't happen here. Plus, eventually complacency will set in and you will just end up settling down on the same 2 or 3 spots, since they're the best starting spots. But those are my only real complaints, if you can even call them that. I'm pretty happy with Satisfactory. In fact, you could say it's a pretty satisfactory game. and on a certain level, I'm pretty happy with every single game on this list. But that's just me and my love of conveyor belts. Feel free to be harsher or kinder to every single game on this list as you will. We're all entitled to our own opinions after all, aren't we? In fact, I'm going to break the mold of my usual videos and ask for the first time for you to please leave a comment telling what you liked or disliked about any of the games on this list. And in fact, if your favorite game didn't make the cut, I might not have heard of it yet, and I would love to hear about it and buy it and play it for hours upon hours of setting down even more conveyor belts. And please recommend me more games, please recommend me more conveyor belt games. You can't deny me my conveyor belts. My factory must grow ever stronger.